Hello, my name is Maggie Harrison and I'm the adoptions manager here at Great Plains SPCA. Today we're going to be chatting about Matchmaking 101, which is all about finding reasons to say yes. So a lot of different families from a lot of different backgrounds will walk through our doors wanting to adopt with us, and so we really want to match the right animal with the right family. Therefore, we don't have initial roadblocks set up to deny adopters, but instead try to match them with the right one for their home environment. This is a huge component of this is focused on knowing the animals that we have in our care, as well as listening to and educating potential adopters. A good thing to remember is that not every family looks the same, and not every animal is going to be a right match for any family. So we really have to get to know both the people coming through the doors and the animals in the shelter to match them appropriately. Our approach to adoptions has been adapted by the Adopters Welcome materials put out by the HSUS. If you are interested in learning more about that and the best practices that they recommend, I'm sure you can Google that to get some more information. But our PowerPoint here does focus on how we do adoptions within Great Plains.
All right, so this meet and greet process for adopters begins as soon as they walk through the door with our reception team greeting them and then asking everyone over the age of 18 to go ahead and sign one of our waivers. This waiver just protects Great Plains against, any accidental cat scratches or slipping in dog urine or anything like that, but it is imperative for anyone over the age of 18 to sign one of those waivers. Once that's been done, we do ask that everyone in the family puts on one of our beautiful visitor stickers to walk around, and they get briefed on a little spiel of how to have some shelter etiquette. So we remind them not to open kennels, not to stick fingers in, not to interact with animals without us present. We have hand sanitizer everywhere, so we ask that, especially in the cattery, they use them between interacting with cats. We have maps available to offer them some guidance as they wander around. Whatever it is, but once they've had that spiel, we set them loose to go walk around and see who we have available. So if they do find some animals that they're interested in meeting, then we ask that they come back to reception for dogs and that they let the cat counselor inside the cattery know if they're interested in meeting some cats. If they are interested in meeting an animal, then we do request that they finish our adoption survey before they get in to a room with them, so that it is a front and back two-sided survey that we do need them to fill out completely before we do have them in a room with an animal. Again, they are eligible to meet any animals that they're interested in. We just restrict that they're not able to, they only can meet one at a time and only two per meet and greet. If we have a long line, that's a very hard two per meet and greet. But if we are rather slow, or maybe we have enough counselors working with families and nobody's waiting, then we can sometimes increase that. But we do try to encourage people to make up their mind and whittle it down to the two that they're most interested in. If they really can't, though, they can meet more than those two animals. They just get bumped to the bottom of the line if we are busy. Again, so once they have those adoption surveys completed, then they just are waiting for our next available staff or volunteer to put them in a room with an animal. So those waits can be non-existent. Maybe we're waiting on them to fill out the survey, or they can be, 3 to 4 hours long. If they are on the longer side, then the potential adopters are able to leave campus, but we do call them when it's their turn in line, and then they have 15 minutes to make it back to campus before they get bumped to the bottom again. Those meet and greets do have to occur with an adoption counselor or a trained volunteer present, or to at least get started. And by completing this matchmaking class, you're well on your way to getting trained up to be a part of our meet and greet volunteers. If you're interested in that, be sure to let myself know or our volunteer manager know as well. If they do decide to adopt, that is something that only our adoption staff will complete. So there's just a few pieces of information that is better left on staff shoulders instead of volunteer shoulders. It's also important to remember that this is a process where they're getting to know an animal. We're asking questions, payments are taken. There's a lot of material to go over. So this is not just a, I want that animal, great, let's get you out the door sort of thing. This process itself, from getting in a room to walking out the door, can take 1.5 hours. So again, on a day where we maybe have a 3-hour long meet and greet, and the adoptions process itself is 1.5 hours, they might be working with Great Plains for 4.5 hours out of their day. So it is important to help set some realistic expectations for potential adopters that they may have some wait times. All right, so now we're getting into a little bit more of the process in regards to how staff and volunteers
use it. So it really begins once that adoption survey has been completed. That is the best way to learn about the family. So do review that in detail. That has a lot of their what they're not going to tolerate, what they think is going to be easy, the experience they've had with animals before, all of that sort of jazz is located on that survey. So do use that as a jumping off point for your matchmaking moving forward. It's also important to remember that we do operate on a first come, first served basis. So it's important that no one is in line for that animal in front of them. If you have questions about that at any time, you can always ask the reception staff that's present or another adoption counselor to make sure. It can get tricky on busy days if we have really high demand animals like puppies or things like that. So never be afraid to ask if you're not sure how the board is reading. It's also important to talk to the customers about the adoption process. Even if they've waited for a while, we do still have to dot the T's, dot the I's and cross the T's on our end, excuse me. So we do want to make sure that we're communicating that, we'll get them in the room. They'll be able to meet the animal. From there, if they decide to adopt, we'll have the paperwork component to do. You may have to pass that off to a staff member and wait for the next available staff member to be present. So it is not just straightforward once it actually starts getting underway. It's also important to know about the animal before you go on and conduct the meet and greet. So do read the notes and companion. You can look at their kennel card, all of that sort of jazz. Ask the animal care team if they have any inside scoop on the dogs down in there. The cattery staff is going to be a great resource if you have questions on any cat temperaments or behavior traits or anything like that. So if you don't know, just ask. But again, we are about matchmaking the animal with the family. So it is important to know the animal that you're introducing to the family. You do want to take the animal and the people to a designated meeting place. Usually that means that you're putting people in one of our meet and greet rooms. And from there, you're grabbing the animal and bringing them in to meet. It's always a good idea to have the people in before the dog is brought in. Sometimes that's not what ends up happening, but that is a good rule of thumb to abide by. And most importantly, you do want to manage the interaction, but not necessarily the animal. So you definitely need to ensure that everyone is being safe, but you also have to let that animal be their true temperament and allow the family to interact and manage it to the best of their ability. So, if we have dogs that have high arousal, they're jumping all around, that sort of thing, it's not like that's going to go away once they're out of the shelter. So if we feel like the family can't manage it in the shelter, then they're probably not able to manage it in the home environment. So again, you do have to give them the opportunity to see the full scope of behavior as appropriate and as safe. If you are unable to manage an animal at its true high arousal level, then you should not be doing that meet and greet. So again, you do want to only interact with the animals that are within your walk dot or that are open to volunteers if you are a volunteer. So if there's one that's staff only, if there's one that's an orange dot that's next in line, but you're only approved for yellow, please, please, please do not volunteer to take on those meet and greets. You do have to first advocate for yourself and work within the restrictions that Great Plains is needing you to. So it is more helpful to have the family wait until a staff person is available and have you jump on the one after that. And it will be for you to take on an animal that you maybe aren't experienced enough to work with. Again, you can always ask staff if you have questions on that. And then we always want to provide education and guidance as appropriate. And it's okay if you don't know the answers to their questions. For example, you may not know all of the answers about the medical information that they might be asking you for a given animal, but you can assure them that the staff person will go over that as they move forward with the adoption. We can even have a staff member be called in sooner if maybe that's a hiccup on how they're deciding between two animals. Same with behavior information. Our behavior team's always available to step in and speak with a potential family if you think it's going to be the hump to either get them to say yes or no to an animal as appropriate. And if the animal that they meet right off the bat isn't the best option for them, remember we have other animals here. So that's really why it's so important to know the animals that we have so that we can always make recommendations based off of kind of the specific family that has come in. Some of my favorite adoption success stories have been matches that were made in the moment and not at all what the family came in for, but absolutely the dog that they should have left with.
All right, so one of the best ways that we can start our matchmaking process is by using open-ended questions. So these questions are going to be anything that allows us to get more information from the potential adopter than just a yes or no. You don't want to ask, have you owned a dog before? That's a yes or no, but tell me about the last dog that you've owned or something along those lines. People will tell you anything as long as you're listening and as long as you're asking, but listening is very important to that. There is no right or wrong answer that people are giving us. There's just, the right match for them. So it's all right if they say that their animal is potentially going to spend portions of time outside. That could be okay for a Pyrenees, but probably wouldn't be okay for a Chihuahua. So again, we are looking at finding reasons to say yes by matching them with the right animal for them. And the best way to do that is by learning about the family that comes through our door without judgment. So again, we really, really want to learn about the family, see what they're interested in, ask these open-ended questions. Any of the ones listed on this slide are going to be great ones to start with. You can also use the prompts of the information that was put on the survey that they have already filled out, as well as just the questions there. You can say, I see that you saw or that you noted this on the survey. Can you tell me more about that? It's always a good idea to just ask as many questions as you feel as appropriate, as long as you're not leaving any room of judgment there. All right, so now we are asking those open-ended questions, and that is helping us get a good feel for our adopters. We're learning more about them, what sorts of situations they're looking for, what sort of animal they're hoping to have. Are they wanting one that's more of a couch potato that hangs out with them while they Netflix and chill? Are they looking for one that's more along the lines of their workout buddy that they're going to go running with? All of those sorts of things are starting to come out in the meet and greet process. It's so important, like I said on the last slide, to be listening to the answers that they're giving us, because that's when we start to get maybe our green, yellow, or red flags. So our green flags are hopefully, 90, 80, 90% of the meet and greets that you're going to have. The people are excited to adopt. They're willing to listen to us who are experts in our field. They're open to the suggestions that we're making. They understand that we have their best interests in mind. They understand our expertise, all of that jazz. Again, this is going to be most of the meet and greets that you hopefully do. You will do some, however, that do have some of those yellow flags thrown in. Those are going to be ones where maybe there's kids or other animals in the home, which by themselves is not a bad thing by any means, but definitely does restrict maybe which animals they're allowed to interact with. So you do want to be cognizant of the fact that the home restrictions may just restrict which animals they're able to meet. You may also be finding that you're having to have some conversations about the amount of training or attention a husky is going to have if you find out that they work, 10-hour days, 6 days a week, that sort of thing. So those might be some of your yellow flag situations where it's probably not the best fit for the home environment, but that doesn't mean it's a no. That doesn't mean that it's anything that's a bad thing. It's just something that needs to be more questions need to be asked, more information needs to be gathered, and potentially some education needs to occur. You also may find yourself in the red flag territory. These are thankfully relatively few and far between, but that does not mean that you won't experience them. Please, please, please do link a manager or the adoptions lead or the MOD in as soon as you hit a red flag situation. The best thing to do is to remove the animal and yourself and have a discussion with the person, the lead manager or MOD, before returning to the room. If you feel that animal's not safe in the same space as that family, you can certainly bring it out with you. From there, there will be some things that we learn about a family that maybe means that there's a lot of education opportunities to work with them, but you may also find that there's just they've come from previous situations where they didn't really know better. For example, you may ask that what sort of heartworm treatments do they have their pets on, and maybe no one's ever chatted with them about heartworm treatment before. So you have a really great opportunity to educate them on the seriousness of that. You may also find that people have surrendered animals to shelters before, but maybe they were going through a divorce and they themselves didn't have a place to live, let alone where their animals could live. So people, come from all walks of life.
So again, we're not here to judge the circumstances that may come out in these red flag situations, but we certainly have to be aware of them when they do present and figure out if we have an animal that would be a good fit for that family or not. Again, since there is the or not component to red flag situations, you do want to bring in the lead or the manager or the MOD because this may result in an adoption being denied for a family. And if that's the case, then that definitely has to be on the radar of the manager slash MOD for the day. One of the most important things is to make sure that everyone is always safe. So if the meet and greet, if you witness a customer being rough with an animal, or if you witness an animal acting inappropriately or past your ability to manage them in the situation, please end the meet and greet at that point. This can be as simple as asking a dog to go into another room, or you can have the whole family leave the room with you, leave the animal in the room, and ask a staff person to go and grab them. There could be a variety of things that cause those sorts of things to happen. But again, if an animal ever escalates past your point of being able to manage them, or if the human customer is being inappropriate with an animal, and the meet and greet, loop a manager in, and we'll proceed from there. All right, so a lot of matchmaking is going to be steering adopters toward the right match. And some of that is going to come from observing what types of behaviors the animal and the adopter are showing. People may tell you that they're looking for an animal with a lot of energy, but then you pull in one of the dogs that jumps all day and needs 3 runs, and that's way more energy than they were hoping for. So you do kind of have to observe both the animal and the adopter to really get a feel of what they're looking for, and then make suggestions and matches based off of that. If you really don't know the answers to the questions that they're asking, you can always pull in another staff member or volunteer that maybe knows a little bit more about them or that specific animal. Some of these things, like being house trained, being good in a car, that sort of information isn't always in companion. So definitely asking if you don't know is always going to be a great approach. And we do want to always spin things in the positive. So we are focused on finding the right match, but that doesn't mean you have to say yes to an adoption. It means you have to say yes to adopting out an animal that would be a good fit. So if they're saying that they want a dog who's going to be outdoors some of the time hanging out with their chickens, you probably shouldn't be suggesting the husky, but maybe that border collie or that Pyrenees is going to be a really good option for them. So again, listen to what they're saying and then also being mindful of what sort of how to spin the suggestion. Based off of what you've shared with me, I think that Bob would be a better fit. It's definitely a lot nicer sounding than Sue doesn't work for you. I don't know who else would, that sort of thing. So again, we're trying to say yes to the right fit. We've already chatted a little bit about this, but it is just so important to remove that judgment when we are talking with potential adopters. While there may be some very, very large opportunities for education for the potential adopters that come through the door, it is important to keep in mind that we as volunteers and staff here at Great Plains are certainly experts in our field, and we have a whole wealth of information that we know that the average public does not. So keeping that in mind again and not judging people for knowing less than us is going to be very, very important and such a critical part of our adoptions approach here at Great Plains. So we do want to focus on sharing the animal specific behaviors and needs. If you find that you're talking from that point, again, always speaking of what's best for the animal and what that animal needs, most people are very receptive to that. And you can speak to what the animal needs without really judging the family's environment. Because again, the education should be informative and not a lecture or any judgment that you have. So you don't want to say prong collars are awful, you should use an easy walk harness. Even if that's your own personal belief. But instead, you can say something like, I see you're having troubles with your dog pulling on the leash. Can I show you some options that I've tried with success? And then from there, you can offer those easy walk harnesses. You can show the start and stop technique that behavior recommends. There's just an opportunity from that point forward to have a conversation that leads to education as opposed to a conversation that is just filled with judgment and hurt feelings. Again, we really don't want to judge the visitors that come here. We don't want anyone to feel like they're not an adoption candidate with us. Instead, we really want to educate everyone so that everybody is a better steward for the animal community in our area.
One opportunity we have for education, but also one unavoidable roadblock, unfortunately, is in regard to bully breeds. So there are certain cities and counties that do have bans on breeds, and it is up to, we have to respect those things in order for how to have our adoptions move forward. Even the perfect family can sometimes live in cities that don't allow those breeds, and unfortunately, that just puts a hard stop to the adoption process. It is always our role to educate on bully looking breeds with the long-term ramifications of what that could mean. So maybe they currently live in a city that allows bully looking breeds, but they have dreams of moving to Denver. That's probably not going to be the right match for them because those dogs are banned there. They have to understand that there is a certain stigma associated with a bully breed, and so they might get some backlash when they're out, at dog parks or that sort of thing. They might currently live in an area that allows it in their apartment, but if they ever move to another apartment, then again, they could no longer be able to have those animals. So those long-term effects that would come after they adopt a bully breed is certainly something that we are responsible for chatting with people about to make sure that they are looking at this adoption as a forever home sort of match. However, it's up. We do encourage adopters to know their own pet policies, but we do not do landlord checks. So we are not contacting people to see if they are allowed to have those breeds or anything along that information. Again, everyone who is eligible to adopt from Great Plains has to be over the age of 18. So they are, in theory, all adults that are able to know these things themselves, and therefore it's their responsibility. We also find that if we put landlord checks landlord checks or breed restrictions as roadblocks to sending these sorts of breeds home, then that only furthers the perception that those sorts of roadblocks are necessary for those kinds of breeds. And so we do not want to have, we don't want to encourage that stigma in any capacity. We just want to educate potential adopters on the animal that they're bringing home. As you hopefully know from the behavior slideshows that you can watch, you hopefully are educated about shy and fearful animals, so we'll just jump right to that. A great reminder that these dogs are considered a flight risk, so that's something that we'll definitely have to speak with potential adopters about. These meet and greets themselves must either occur in our outdoor dog yards with a leash on or the covered yard, depending on how flighty they are, or done in one of the larger rooms, the indoor play or the training room located over at the VCC. We should not be doing these meet and greets in our smaller meet and greet rooms without manager or MOD approval. Additionally, we will want to make sure that those collars and harnesses are fitting properly because, again, they are considered flight risks. So making sure they can't just slip out of them is going to be a high priority. We have to speak with adopters about the importance of being mindful of transition areas and that can be anything from the doorways in their homes to just getting in and out of cars. That is the way that we kind of hear about animals getting loose the most is that they get home and they have the garage door open and they go to get the animal out of the car and they get out of the car and they bolt out of the garage because that door was open. Or in the first few days that they're home, they, just leave the door open for a second while they're chatting with a neighbor and the dog runs out. So just being really mindful of these everyday situations that may accidentally and unknowingly put an animal at risk out of their fear. We also have to counsel on introducing the dogs to new people. So a great way to do that is to demonstrate in the meet and greet by having them do the same things that they would want their potential friends and family to do. So having them sit on the floor with treats, ignoring the dog until they get comfortable, tossing things their way, that sort of thing. But slow introductions to new people is definitely going to have to be gone over. We'll also, again, have to talk about how to handle having new people in the home. The best thing to do there is to have the animal put away in another room before the new people even walk through the door so that the dog can listen for 15-20 minutes while the family talks to the new visitor in the home. That way the dog who has trust with the family will learn that the family is comfortable with this new visitor that's arrived, and so therefore the dog will hopefully be comfortable with the new visitor. Making sure that the new visitor will have treats after that 15-20 minute time period is going to be important to offer to the dog, but at no point should those introductions be forced. If the dog is still uncomfortable while they're in that other room, then that's fine, and it's
totally all right for that dog not to meet new visitors until they're ready. As we mentioned, just like making sure that the collar and the harness fit properly, you'll want to make sure that the fencing is secure to limit that escape risk potential. And you'll want to work on using positive reinforcement to build confidence in the home. So, using games where they get to win, allowing them to explore, and build trust is all going to be really important in terms of training. Additionally, you'll really want to have that bond built with an animal before you just let them free roam in the house or even free roam in the backyard unsupervised. So really establishing the bond to both the family members, and the home that the animal's going to be in before unsupervised time occurs. We'll always want to have that microchip information up to date. That is working with a third party, not with Great Plains, to ensure that that happens. But PetLink is going to be very accessible to ensure that the family can keep that information up to date. And some cases where maybe they're a shy and fearful dog that spent most of its life out on run and loose, they may very much invest in a collar with GPS tracking. Microchips only identify the animal when they're scanned. It's not a way to track the animal's location. So a GPS collar would be a way to always have eyes on the location of the animal. And then, any animal with a mouth can bite. So even if they are afraid and they never bite in any normal situation, if they get loose and it's thunderstorming and they get cornered and a stranger goes to pick them up, they're just as likely to bite as any other animal that's afraid. So being really mindful and reminding the family that there's always a potential risk of a bite occurring in the home if the animal's not managed appropriately. And some people will ask about the home environment that occurred to this animal before they came to us. Most often we don't have those details because they came to us as a stray. So really just focusing on how to help the animal come out of their shell and how to manage their growth and build their confidence is going to be way more important than the why and how of what got them scared in the first place. All right, so Great Plains does adopt out animals that do have bite histories. The behavior team will evaluate every single bite that occurs either before the animal comes to the shelter or once they're here. And from there, if an animal is eligible to be adopted out, that means it has been cleared by our behavior team. There may be added restrictions that are placed on that animal for either consult levels that have to occur in order for the animal to even go home with a family, or it may involve things like the animal's not allowed to go home with kids under the age of 8 or 10 or 12 or 18 or things like that. So definitely, if you're looking at an animal that has a bite history, you'll want to be very educated on its potential restrictions for any home environment, as well as any restrictions for the behavior consult that might have to occur. Additionally, we want to be very truthful with what we say without projecting any sort of blame, and also while protecting the privacy of victims. So we don't want to shame anyone for the fact that a bite occurred. We just want to speak truthfully about maybe what triggered the bite, and maybe demonstrate that there is an opportunity for that behavior to be managed. But again, we don't want to place judgment on anyone that was involved in the previous circumstance. So again, we want to alert the family to the general issue, and it's more than okay to say something along these lines, that the dog has a bite history, that the dog was running loose, cornered, and bit when picked up by a stranger, and the behavior team will be available to discuss management and details more if you're interested in adopting. All right, so one of the biggest education opportunities that you will have is based off of the sorts of leashes and collars and tools that the animals come in with that maybe are waiting on a dog-to-dog introduction with a potential adopted animal. Also, people are welcome to bring in collars and leashes from outside sources and not purchased through Great Plains. So you may see that they're pulling out a retractable leash from their bag when you're finalizing that adoption for a big old thick pitty mama, and that's a great opportunity to educate on maybe why a retractable leash isn't the best option for that animal in particular. So it is a great way the best way to have these conversations is to start with what has worked for you. 9 times out of 10, when I'm promoting an easy walk harness, I'm telling those adopters about my 89-pound dog who likes to pull at the end of the leash and chase after squirrels.
and I can walk him with the leash draped on one finger when he's in his easy walk, and when he chases after a squirrel, he does a somersault when he wears his easy walk harness. That usually is a good enough selling point for people, but again, make it your own and speak to what you are comfortable doing so. But remember that this is an opportunity to educate and it's not to judge. So if you do see somebody with those retractable leashes or potentially prong collars, asking them why they like those options, and then maybe using their response as a way to suggest one of the other more Great Plains backed training tools is going to be much more effective than just passing judgment on their life choices. Um, it's always a great idea that if you are able, or if they are purchasing any sort of collar or harness from us, or even they brought one in that they've never used before and they don't know how it works, explain how you put it on, show them how it works, show them that, maybe you have to ask the dog to sit before you put the leash on because otherwise they lose their mind. That sort of thing is all going to be really important to communicate and actually demonstrate with them. Especially with those easy walk harnesses, people are going to put those on incorrectly if they aren't shown that, the belly strap is the one that's the different color. The part where the leash attaches is like the diamond on the necklace. There's just so many opportunities to explain how to best use the tool so that they actually understand why it's an important tool and you weren't just swindling them for an upsale or something like that. And a general reminder is that a collar fits properly when you can put 4 fingers between the collar and the animal's neck. Any more is too loose, especially for those shy and fearful or big pullers or the right out walking straight out the door to the car. We certainly want it to be fitted with just those 4 fingers between the collar and the neck. Anything more than that is certainly too tight. Adopters in general have a preference of a looser collar, so reminding them that we're going to keep it a little bit tight before they get into their own home and the animal gets comfortable for a few days and then they can loosen it up. But we certainly want it to be fitting properly when they walk out of Great Plains' door. Another great education opportunity you're going to run into are discussing behavior topics that come up in the meet and greets themselves. For all of these across the board, if you don't feel like you are equipped to speak to them or about them, then you can certainly always bring in somebody from the behavior team or management or the adoptions team to speak to these issues. We certainly want to start having these conversations in the meet and greet as opposed to once they've decided that that's the animal for them, and then the adoption staff comes in and maybe follows up about, let's say, the separation anxiety the dog might have. That's going to be a little alarming for the family and may ultimately be a reason that they decide not to adopt. So we do want to be mindful that we have to mention some potential issues of management in the home in the meet and greet so they're not blindsided by it later on. The biggest one on here that I certainly would bring behavior in sooner rather than later is those alpha roles. Usually people are just not educated on why those things have been debunked. And so they're operating with the belief that they saw it on television and Cesar Millan's popular, so it must be fine to train like him. So 8 times, 5, most of the time, people are going to be very receptive if you explain to them why those techniques are no longer appropriate. They usually respond pretty positively to that education opportunity. However, there will be some people that are adamant that alpha roles are a necessary tool. And again, that's why it's great to have behavior team already in the room to kind of navigate some of those stickier conversations with that one. The rest of these guys, again, I really just start in the conversation, teeing them up for behavior to come in and finish them, or the adoptions team to come in and finish talking about them. Slow introductions in the home are going to be in regards to which animals they may already have at home. Depending on which species they are, they'll be counseled on different ways, but in general, about a 2-week period where the animals are kept separate and only allowed to interact with supervision is going to be kind of an overarching approach to introducing a new animal to the resident animals. Resource guarding is certainly an issue, especially if there are going to be children in the home, to make sure that everyone is staying safe and happy with each other. But resource guarding
in this sense refers to the animal guarding the people from other people. So you'll definitely want to work on combating that and not allowing that behavior to occur. There's also obviously food, treat, toy aggression that can come, or food, treat, toy guarding that can occur. With those, you'll want to work on that leave it training and trade up. So you can demonstrate those things in the meet and greet. You can also, again, always call somebody in to demonstrate those things until you learn how to do them yourself. Separation anxiety is certainly an issue that we want to start the conversation with sooner rather than later, because that can be a deal breaker for people who work long days or anything like that, live in an apartment, rent, don't own. That can certainly be a deal breaker. So letting them know, usually in the notes we have an idea or at least some guidelines on how we would recommend that the separation anxiety is managed in the home, whether that's in a crate, if the crate has to be an extreme crate like a gorilla crate, or if it's as small as just using some zip ties, that sort of thing. So definitely can pull behavior in to speak to that in more depth if you are unsure about that specific animal's type of separation anxiety. And then finally, we've got that barrier aggression. Luckily, the family, if they're walking around the building, they've already seen a dog bark at them because of the barrier in between them. So you can always refer to that as an example. But it is going to be a behavior that a lot of people are going to want to not have in the home environment, especially again, if they live in an apartment or anything like that, where maybe there's a lot of other animals around. So there's a great opportunity to demonstrate how to work with that barrier aggression, demonstrate, the leash work, talking about ways to minimize having the dog have access to that front door, making sure that they're not just allowed to rush it every time the doorbell rings. All of that stuff is going to be great management and training opportunities. And once again, the behavior team, myself, the adoption staff, all of us can be called in to have these conversations in more detail until you yourself are comfortable having them. One of the funnest opportunities for education is when you have those know-it-alls walk through the door. It's great for them. They usually know everything there is to know about owning a dog or a cat, and they're just there to point at one and take that one home. However, oftentimes there is still an opportunity to educate them, but you'll only know that if you start by listening. So that is going to be the very first step that is necessary for any meet and greet, but especially when you're dealing with these kinds of folks, because you're going to have to use what they tell you to communicate what the new animal needs. So if they're telling you that they've had experience with shy and fearful dogs before, it's no problem, but now they're looking at adopting a dog that maybe came from a hoarding situation and is going to need a whole lot of socialization help, you can speak specifically to how a hoarding situation differs than just a normal shy and fearful dog. But again, first you have to listen to what they've said and what they have had experience with to highlight the differences. Own dogs and shelter dogs just are different in general as well. So if they've always had, they've gotten friends or dogs from friends and those sorts of situations, then you'll be able to speak to how shelter dogs, are living in an environment that will require decompression time and that sort of thing. Um, Another thing that you can always do is to pull in a second person. Sometimes that can be the behavior team, sometimes that can be another adoption counselor, manager, anybody like that. But oftentimes, just another person coming in after all of this has been shared, they're more apt to listen because just the physical presence of a second person can kind of put a little bit more authority behind their words. So, that their meet and greet was escalated and needed additional support. So, that can be a very effective tool to getting more of your points across when you are experiencing those know-it-alls. Additionally, don't take it personally. It certainly is not a slight against what you know by any means. It's just a slight, it's really just highlights their ability to listen. So a lot of times these people are very confident in what they have experience with, and they're here getting asked a whole bunch of questions by people who care about animals, and so sometimes they feel like they're put on the spot, and sometimes they do get defensive. So again, if we're listening and coming at them from that angle, usually it ends up pretty well. And sometimes you just have to treat it a little bit like school and let people know that there is specific information that you as a representative of Great Plains are responsible for making sure that they understand, and it doesn't matter if they know it, you have to say it, you have to give them those documents, you have to send them home with that paperwork, that sort of thing. So you can always just say it's an added bonus as opposed to a mandatory lecture, that they're getting some additional information to have the animal be successful. I'm sure they're already going to do a great job, but we want to make sure that they have every tool available and just really know how much we're there to support them. And then everybody likes flattery, so you can always congratulate them on how successful they were with, say, that shy dog that they got to come out of their shell. But again, this hoarding dog is going to need a lot more work. So while that, the shy dog they had before opened up within just a few weeks, this hoarding dog may take a couple of months. And so it's great that they recognize that they like working with shy dogs, that they feel like they're confident doing so. But again, it's going to have to be at the pace of the dog that they are adopting and not the pace set by their previous animals or their expectations of that. And as always, you can pull somebody in to help have those conversations if necessary. All right, now on to our adoption fees. So our highest adoption fee, as you can see, is that $350 mark for both puppies and hips. Hips are going to be our high profile pets. So those are anybody that's under the 35 pounds or is considered to be probably a purebred. We often don't know for sure, but if we get a doodle in, or for example, a purebred, looking purebred Australian Shepherd or something like that, that would have that 350 mark associated with them. We also have our kittens at 180. Kittens and puppies are going to be anything under the age of 6 months, and then adult animals are going to be anything over the age of 6 months. So adult cats are going to be 60, while adult dogs are 150. Our Pause for Hope program is like our hospice adoption program, just with a much nicer name, and those adoption fees are going to be $50 to ensure that they can get into homes sooner rather than later. If our behavior team determines that any animals have been bonded, then their adoption fee would be 2 for 1 of whatever their fee was set at. We consider senior animals to be 13 years or older. So if that's the case, then they would be half off their regular adoption fee. So for example, if they are under 35 pounds but considered a hip, then they would be half off under 35 pounds and a hip, but over the age of 13, and then they'd be half off that 350. We also have, we cut the adoption fees in half after a dog has been available for 30 days. That is just exclusive to dogs, and usually it's just that 30-day mark. Obviously, there are some situations where we may feel that an animal is going to sit at the shelter for longer, so we may decide to have that adoption fee sooner rather than later. But in general, the 30-day mark, every dog will get dropped down to half of what their adoption fee was if they're still with us.
All right, so here we're going over everything that is included in those adoption fees we just chatted about. As I said on the last slide, our average cost of care is $751 for each animal that is here. A good chunk of that money is covered by these things that you see on the slide and the kind of treatments they get before they are eligible for adoption. So they are spayed and neutered before they hit our adoption floor. They also have all of the vaccinations appropriate for their age and their species administered. There certainly may be some boosters or things like that that have to occur after the time of adoption, but they are up to date on everything when they walk out the door. We also do some testing when the animal first comes in. For dogs, we test for heartworms. For cats, we test for FIV, FELV, and heartworms. The FELV obviously cannot be adopted out in Kansas, so unfortunately, if they do test positive for that, that is a case for euthanasia. However, FIV and heartworms is something that we are happy to counsel adopters on and can speak with them about those things. Also with the heartworms, Great Plains partners with heartworm treatments for dogs moving forward. So we certainly would counsel on that treatment plan and what that means for their activity and those sorts of restrictions that they might be on. Additionally, each animal has a microchip that gets registered to the adopter at time of adoption. They've also gotten those deworming and up to date on flea prevention and heartworm prevention when they walk out the door to make sure that they are feeling fine. And finally, we do send every adopter home with some starter food to get their animal going. They're welcome to transition their animal onto anything that they would like to feed them, but we give them that starter bag to get them going. If for any reason the animal is on wet food or a special diet or anything like that, then we certainly send them home with some starter amounts of those special foods as well. Now, when you're in the meet and greet process, you may find that there needs to be a hold place for some reason. So if they decide not to adopt in the moment, that's usually when the holds start to occur. So there's a couple of different reasons why this may be the case. The biggest one is that the family doesn't have the other animal, or maybe not all of the rest of the family is there. So they can then place one of those dog-to-dog holds. Those are going to be kind of a 2-hour hold. That's a loose 2 hours, but a 2-hour hold where they can run home, grab the animal or the other family members, and come back that same day. Those are going to be fee waived as they're a little bit more casual, but there has to be that understanding that they're back as soon as they possibly can to meet the animal, and then from there they would move forward with adoption. There is also our $30 holds that families can place on animals. Those cover the cost of care for the animal to stay at the shelter for an extra day. So if per se it's Friday afternoon and their kids are off on Saturdays, so the parents may want to place a hold Friday afternoon to have an appointment time for Saturday mid-morning, that would be a $30 hold fee for that. We would schedule an appointment time with them, so they would have to come to the shelter at that agreed upon time, and that is when they would get to work with us. There is also that $50 early bird hold fee. These are placed on unavailable animals who have not yet been cleared by our behavior or medical team. There may be a reason why that animal never becomes available. Maybe rescue is the only option for them, or they get some behavior or medical restrictions put on them that the family is not able to handle or equip or eligible for. Like they may not be able to go home with kids and they have kids, something along those lines. So these $50 early bird hold fees do not guarantee that an animal will be a good fit for them or even go home with them. It just guarantees that they will be the first ones contacted once that animal is available, and we will proceed from there. Again, those $30 holds or the $50 holds, they hold that animal until the appointment time set for the following day. So an early bird hold fee once that animal is available, if they do meet those qualifications for the animal to go home with them, we would also set an appointment time with them. And they're non-refundable, they're non-transferable, meaning that they don't go towards the cost of adoption. They cannot use that $30 fee to then purchase retail or anything like that. It is just strictly considered a donation, again, to cover the cost of care for that animal having to sit in the shelter for another evening, or just to guarantee the customer service of being contacted first in line once an animal has been cleared medically or behaviorally, if we're talking about those early bird holds. All right, so if you're in that meet and greet and your family does decide that they want to move forward with adoption, these are the steps that you're going to follow. The first thing you want to do is put that animal back into the kennel. We do prefer that the animals are in the kennel so that the family can focus completely on the adoption paperwork and process. Once that's been done, you'll want to escort the family to the front desk or direct them to the front desk as you're putting the animal away. Once you're up there, do alert the people behind the counter in reception that you have a family that is ready to move forward with adoption if you are not able to do the adoption yourself. Then once you have done that, you'll want to get the paperwork, anything that you've pulled out, make sure that the folder is all put together so that when the adoption counselor moves forward with the adoption, everything is there as it should be. It's a great time to remind the adopters that there may be a wait, manage their expectations. If we have all of our adoption staff currently working with families, then there may be anywhere between a 5-minute to a 45-minute wait, depending on the timing. The reception team would be a great resource to help manage those timeline expectations. So if you do have questions, make sure you ask those people. Again, we are here to support you with any of those kinds of intricacies of the adoption process. If they do have to wait, you can always direct them to the retail area so that they can browse there while they are waiting for their adoption to be finalized. And make sure you thank them, because it is great that they chose to come to Great Plains to adopt. There's just so many positives with that, and we cannot do what we do without people coming to our doors looking for animals. So do make sure you thank them. Even if it was a challenging meet and greet, we're still pleased that we've got to the point of adoption and that we are having an animal go home. Sometimes, despite how cute our animals are and our best efforts, the family does decide not to adopt with us, but that is still more than fine. We always want an animal to go to a home that is going to be prepared and ready to take them on. So if they are deciding not to adopt, then that is a smart decision for their lifestyle, and we want to thank them for making that choice. Let them know that we do have animals that become available every day. Our website updates every 20 minutes, so they should be encouraged to pay attention to that and watch, and they can always email or call Great Plains if they have questions about any of our newly available animals. But do be sure to thank them because we are pleased that they took the time to come to Great Plains. They probably waited a little bit. We want to make sure that they feel appreciated while they've been here. So do thank them regardless of how the meet and greet turns out. So now that you've passed off that adoption to an adoption counselor, or you've thanked your family for coming out and they've walked out the door, now it's time to put notes in on that meet and greet process that you experienced. So did your dog maybe meet a man? As you know, our staff and volunteers tend to be pretty female dominated. So maybe the dog did really well with the gentleman in the meet and greet, or it did poorly. Maybe they did great with the dog that they met, or maybe it did poorly. Maybe the cat, did end up scratching the woman, but she had some pretty strong perfume. So, anything, there's no note that's too small. As long as you think that it could be helpful for the next family, the next adopter, the next adoption counselor, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to add those notes into our companion software. If you don't have access to that, you can always leave a handwritten note for the staff to then enter at a later time. But any notes can be really helpful. Just like you read the notes before you put the animal into the meet and greet with the family, the notes that you'll add after the meet and greet will set the next adoption counselor up for success for the hopeful new family. Um, Additionally, there may be some adoptions that do move forward that maybe are against the suggestions of the behavior team. Maybe there was a dog to dog introduction that didn't go great, but the family was adamant that they had the ability to do crate and rotate and manage that behavior in the home. If and when those situations do arise, I do strongly recommend that behavior has already been looped in so that no one is surprised by that information. But you'll also want to put in a note into companion that designates what you kind of educated them on, what information you provided, and what was talked about, so that if that animal does come back, we're able to determine, if there was a management error, maybe there was a communication error, maybe there was we learned something new that we didn't previously know about the dog based off of kind of the counseling that was done previously. So definitely you'll have to put notes in for those sorts of situations, but I do strongly advise that you enter notes about any interesting, positive, negative, anything behavior related that may present in any of the meet and greets that you have. All right, so finally, we've just got some general reminders. A big one is that we do want to hear about those concerns that you might have seen or heard with any potential adopter. We absolutely appreciate being brought in as soon as those things arise. Again, if you have any yellow or red flags, do bring in the behavior team, the adoptions team, any team of management, any team of animal care. We are all here to make sure that those concerns are being vetted and examined. So definitely do bring those to our attention sooner rather than later. With that, no adoption is guaranteed. So there may be new information that we get at any given moment that could change the animal's ability to go home. It could change our perception of the adopters themselves. There is just no guarantee. So do keep that in the back of your mind. But in general, if people are seeming like a good home and they have been approved by us to take an animal home, those adoptions usually always move forward. We do ask, though, that you do trust in the staff's final judgment. We also have the animal's best interest in mind, and we do operate with that at all times. So do trust that that is going to continue in every situation that we're in. We're always working to do what's right for the animals. So if we do feel like maybe a red flag is actually more of a yellow flag, or we feel like there was an opportunity for education, those are going to be reasons that maybe the staff's judgment does have the final say in certain situations. And with that, you do want to make sure that, if you have a difference, it's communicated in an appropriate way. We want to make sure that, while differences are okay, they are not communicated and shared in front of adopters. We are all part of Great Plains and want to present a united front with every adopter that comes through our door. So if you are feeling differently than maybe the staff ultimately decided, communicate that in an appropriate way with the appropriate people. And again, just not in front of adopters. Thank you very much for watching our matchmaking PowerPoint. I am here if you have any questions at all. My email is linked down there at the bottom, the mharrison@greatplainspca.org. Again, I'm the adoption manager here, so I'm happy to help with any questions that you might have. If you have maybe a more general question that you just are curious about, you can always shoot an email as well to our adoptions@greatplainspca.org. That is going to reach our wonderful adoptions staff, and so they also can vet a bunch of your questions that you may be thinking of. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Definitely do reach out to me directly at that M. Harrison email if you are interested in learning how to do the meet and greets themselves and moving forward with that. We also have volunteer opportunities with our reception team, and just a whole bunch of different things. So if any of this has sparked an interest and you're wanting to learn new ways to help and get involved with Great Plains and with adoptions themselves, definitely do shoot me an email. I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.